Every now and then you hear someone speak and it completely shifts the way you think about performance and leadership. And that is exactly what happened when Gilbert Enoka took the stage recently at Florence Guild to talk about his new book, Become Unstoppable. Gilbert's story isn't theory, it's lived experience, from humble beginnings in an orphanage to shaping the mindset of the All Blacks. He spent decades helping people perform under pressure, lead with humility, and find calm in the chaos. In this episode, you'll first hear Gilbert's exclusive keynote. It's raw, it's honest, and it's full of lessons about grit, leadership, and adapting when everything changes around you. Then, I sit down with Gilbert in an exclusive conversation where we go even deeper into the early failures that built his resilience, the moments that define his leadership, and what it really takes to stay adaptable in a world that never stops moving. Then we asked the audience for their questions. They were honest, they were open, and they were raw. This is Performance Intelligence, the show that unlocks potential for everyday life.
Become unstoppable is one hell of a phrase. I've learned that you can become unstoppable if you work on the things other people can't take away from you. And the things other people can't take away from you are things like your character and your mindset. And, you think of the people in your own life who've had a big influence on you, and you would probably find that aspects of character come to mind reasonably strongly. They know who they are, they be who they are, and they stay who they are. This know me, be me, stay me becomes a powerful anchor for individuals who are on a course to become unstoppable. But like a freight train in terms of what it does. And I spend more time with my athletes working on a to-be list than I do a to-do list. And a lot of that's to do with their character and aspects of who they want to be, and then they behave themselves into that space. And you become a very difficult opponent for anyone and anything when you do that. And so that becomes hugely, hugely powerful. And any victory I've had in my own life that hasn't involved character has always been hollow to me. And so I work on that reasonably strongly with the individuals we work with. And mindset is really interesting because I've also learned that you can only win when your mind is stronger than your emotions. Heck of a statement. You can't stop your emotions, and they get you in trouble a lot of the time. And so what we have to do is to power up the way we respond to the way our biology reacts to the world and to the influences that connect with us. And so we begin to understand that your skill sets don't work unless your mindset's right. And so the place you work doesn't determine your value, your mindset does. And so if we sharpen our mindset and we weaponize it, then we have a tool which enables us to really navigate our way through the intricacies and the challenges of life. And those two ingredients, no one else can take them away from you. And quite often to move our way forward, we've got to get out of our own way. And that's a lot to do with the way in which we actually deal with the thoughts that come into our head. And so that's sort of how we came up with the Become Unstoppable. It says it's a blueprint. It's not a menu-driven approach. It's not a step-by-step approach. It's random sequential. The book will take you in lots of different directions. And because you're always different, you'll find the learnings inside it will be different. Now, I've structured the book in quite an interesting way. At the end of each chapter, we have a section which I've called Te Puna o Te Ki. And in Māori, that means the wellspring of wisdom. And so in the Pacific culture, in my own culture and in Māori culture, people get wisdom from the land, from the sea, from the mountains, from the wharanui, where they tell stories about what happened generations beforehand. It's a wellspring of wisdom. And so what I have done is created some lessons inside that. And at the end of each chapter, I also have what I call a widow. And a widow in our culture is, if you come onto a marae inside New Zealand, into Māori marae, when you arrive at the gate, somebody comes out with a manuka leaf and they place a manuka leaf in front of you. And if you pick that manuka leaf up, it's you accepting the challenge and that you come in peace for those people inside that building. And so throughout the book and at the end of each chapter, I present a widow to you. It's a challenge for you to take. to accept or otherwise. It's not an exam to pass, it's a door to walk through. In the Te Puna o Te Ki, I talk about, the special places in sport, the meeting places where you meet with legends of the game, the fun times you have together. You see that cup there, you guys haven't seen that very much these days. But when I finished, I wanted to make sure that it didn't happen on my watch. I was kind of strong. It holds 44 bottles of Steinlager Pure, and I enjoyed drinking out of that often. But I've also worked in cricket. I had 8 years touring with our Black Caps. I'm going to be working with the England team in the Ashes series over here this summer. I had 22 and 23 working with Chelsea Football Club. And so I've had a whole range of experiences in and around it, and inside these places are rituals that offer a wellspring of wisdom. And so at the end of each chapter, I tell a story which is meant not only to be read but to be felt. It's a book that you will feel as much as you read. And that's the special nature. And I'll take you to some different places. They're obscure, but inside each one is a lesson. And that number 8 jersey, Kieran Reid, who was our captain of the All Blacks, and I was always the last one to leave the shed because I put the GPS monitors in the back of the jerseys, and he always wanted to have his number 8 so he could see it. And so in the All Black dressing room, there was nothing on the walls. The only thing that existed inside that shed was your jersey. Because the responsibility you had each day was to come in, put that jersey on and fill it, and put a performance in that pays respect to those that have gone before you and sets the example for those that will follow you. You don't need motivation quotes all around the wall. You just go in and you do the business on that day, and that become hugely important. You get wisdom from special places. That's, Twickenham, that's Ellis Park in South Africa, Millennium Stadium, one of my favourites, and obviously Eden Park, our home ground. And so there's lots of places where if you pause and listen, you can get pieces of wisdom from it. And we talk about the understanding that went into the execution, and when performance is rooted in a deep understanding and a connection to who you are and what you represent, you create a power that is wonderfully penetrating, and that's a beautiful story. We talk about the pain of 2007, worst performance in the history of the All Blacks. Back in 2007, and then we went to win in 11 and got back-to-back World Cups in 2015. Coach actually looks younger in 2011 than he did in 2007, such as the pain and the lessons that happen in that. All of these are well springs of wisdom, and the stories are told to extract things that can help us to get better at getting better. That's what the book's about. How do I get better at getting better? That's the challenge that this book sets out to the reader. I created what I called a human library. And a human library is, where we brought men into the environment that were legends of the game that stayed there. So it was like a book that you get out of the library. And, they travelled on the bus, they went to the trainings, they went to the games. So it was a constant resource for the current crew to learn from. And there's tons of wisdoms and those conversations you had in those quiet moments that penetrated more deeply than the loud moments that people see. Lots of legends who leave behind more than just stats. Everyone's got a story, and the wisdoms that come from those people are magic in lots of different ways. At the end of every test, quite often I'd stand with Richie McCaw under the goalpost, which was a ritual I used to do. And quite often we'd turn to each other and he said, if you had 2 more days to prepare for this test, what would you do? I'd quite often say nothing. He said, well, we're ready then, aren't we? And away you go. Sometimes you think you've got to do more and you've got to do things, but sometimes you're ready and you just got to say, bring it on. And in life, that's a beautiful thing. Some mates of mine that I spent over 2 decades with, sharing some wisdoms in those moments, special moments. You look at those photos and you can climb inside them and you feel them. You don't just see them. Wayne Smith, he's my brother from another mother, took me on, and when I first started, he had to take me on as a massage therapist, as a masseur, because the powers didn't want anyone dealing with the mental part of the game with the players. They thought you were weak. And the book tells a story where one of the board members were coming in just to check and seeing what I was doing, and he said, Bert, you better go down and get some oil to rub. So I went down and bought some oil, and I was rubbing the shoulder when the person came in. I was saying, "G'day, here you go." And he looked at me and gave me the big tick. Well, what I'd realised, I got peanut oil instead of the right oil. He said, "I wanted you to rub him, not bloody fry him," he said to me. But he believed in me when others didn't, and gave me the opportunity, as did Lee Gibbs and netball. And, at times when the world's not ready for something because their understanding's not there, there's still a way. I always say sometimes, our impatience to win is the reason we lose. So if Wayne wanted to take me in as a psychologist or as a mental performance coach, I wouldn't have got in, but he got me in as a masseur, so it was okay just to take a different step. And that is beautiful. That's a te puna o te ki. And then you follow that with the widow. Remember, my advice to people is to read the book, Let the Widows Land, and then go back to it, flick through the widows, and those that stir something in you have got your name on it. And then work on them and work with them and just see how they can help you shape what it is that you want to do. Okay, thanks very much.
I want to go back to the teams you've worked with, the New Zealand Black Caps, the Silver Ferns, the Crusaders, Chelsea Football Club, the mighty New South Wales State of Origin, the England cricket team. What do we think about that? Yeah, there was no boos. Come on, for the Australians here, we've got to rip into you. In 23 years with the All Blacks, there's one team missing. I've been with the Wallabies the past 12 months. Half of our team is from the All Blacks, the mighty Joe Schmidt, a good buddy of yours, Mike Cron. We've got Sass now, one of our forwards coaches. Would have you ever come across to the Wallabies?
Got close. Joe, asked me about 4 times, to be fair, but once I saw your jersey, I couldn't. I just, it's funny, like I love those guys and I love them to bits, and it's just the black, I just couldn't work against the black jersey, it's, and yet I can work in other sports, different, but that's just been so infiltrated. I still think Joe Schmidt is the best coach in world rugby at the moment, by the way.
I agree.
And that was close to, so I'd never say never, but probably unlikely.
Left it open. Do you feel like that when you line up against the New Zealand cricket team? So as we record this, we're in Australia heading into a summer with the Ashes. Do you feel any guilt working against the homeland?
It's funny because I work with them in the T20 series over there. They're now playing the ODIs and struggling, actually, England are. And then obviously I'll join them in Perth for the Ashes. Not all of them, I'll just do the build-up, the first test and probably another one. But it did feel a bit funny, but not the same.
Their coach is a Kiwi.
That's right. Yeah, there's 4 Kiwis in the England thing. There's Jeetan Patel and Tim Southey, myself and Baz. So, and I tell you, he does things differently. I'm learning quite a lot of him.
In your book, one of the things that I found gripping was your notion of pressure as a lifestyle. You say the truth about pressure is that nobody's born with skills to perform under the weight of expectations, scrutiny and consequence. They learn them. Pressure is a lifestyle. You go on to say pressure can even be addictive if handled correctly. At your tender age, well, you're in your 30s now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you reckon you're addicted to pressure?
Oh, look, I still hate it. But I mean, what I've learned to understand is that pressure isn't the enemy, it's the arena. And once you understand that as an athlete and an individual, like the great thing about the book is everyone has pressure inside their roles, but once you understand that it's not the enemy, it's the arena that we operate in, and it's not a matter of rising above pressure, it's a matter of just getting inside that bubble and acknowledging the discomfort, because there's always discomfort that associates with pressure, and then learning skills that help you navigate your way through it. How do I manage the butterflies that I get when I'm coming up to something that's really important to me? How do I manage the negative thoughts? Like I talk about the fact that, my upbringing caused me lots of challenges, and I've got lots of scars and lots of triggers, and they happen sometimes every day, but I can catch them when they're a spark before it becomes a flame. So once you understand that pressure is the arena and not the enemy, and I just need a whole set of tools to navigate my way through, then you can lean into it. And I do enjoy it. I enjoy those moments now that you're not sure what's going to happen, that everything, Richie McCaw used to say to me, we'd go to the walkover on a game day and I'd catch his eye and he'd catch my eye and we'd just give him the Kiwi g'day. But what we're really saying is that, everything that we'd work for comes back down to what happens today. You're playing a knockout at a Rugby World Cup. I've been intrigued the last 2 nights watching the Women's World Cup cricket. And England got knocked out by South Africa, big surprise. And then when I went to bed last night, Australia had scored 338. And one day I thought, wow, they're going to motor. And then India knocked them over and got 345, And then all of a sudden hadn't lost the tournament, and they come to that moment and had a game in the tournament, and everything's up for grabs. So yeah, I've learned to navigate my way through it. Sometimes it's not always enjoyable, but it's certainly a place I'd rather be in than just to be comfortable and sedentary.
You mentioned your book is not just for athletes or coaches. While the lessons have been learnt in that crucible of pressure called elite sport, as I look around this lovely audience, very athletic looking audience, but we've got a lot of entrepreneurs here. Athletes in the room, put your hand up. Every middle-aged male puts his hand up. Of course I am. So look at me. Can we get really practical and tactical? Because your book is, especially around pressure. I love your reset routine around part 1, regain emotional control, part 2, clear the deck, part 3, next action. How would you do that for these people in the room? How would you reset? It could be a board presentation, sales meeting, it could be going for a new job, it could be going on a date.
Again, you can only win when your mind is stronger than your emotions. So having a reset structure, like I had some general patterns. So in the book, you'll hear me talk about what I call a holy hour. I encourage everybody to have a holy hour, and in your holy hour, you do 3 things. One is you work out what aspect of your character do you really want to strengthen today or this week? Not 5, not 6, not 3, just 1. And then I quite often get people just to write it in the steam of the shower in the morning before they get going. And then you can behave your way forward to that. 2, what's likely to happen that is an event that causes a bit of stress for me, a high pressure moment that is risky for me. And once I prime my mind for it and say, well, if this happens, I want to do this, then I've primed it. And if it happens, I act better in the moment for it. 3rd way is like when I'm on tour, like we're on tours, like most nights I'd sit with George Duncan, who's a muscle therapist, and we'd have 2 glasses of red wine every night. And we'd close the door and we'd vent. No one was safe. No one or no thing was safe. We just vented. And bang, bang, it only took about 45 minutes, and then we open the door, go to bed, and we feel all good. So that's the bigger picture, have structures in place. In the microstructure, in those moments where you feel that anxiety, I kind of think it's important. Let action lead emotion, I think is really important, Andrew. So, when you're on the field and all of a sudden you're starting to feel, gosh, this next period's really important to me, or I'm going into a board meeting and this presentation's really important to me. Well, we bring the time horizon forward and just say, right, okay, just concentrate on the first 5 paces that I have when I walk into the room. And if you action and you bring your horizon forward, those micro moments give you a sense of connection to the moment, and before you know that leads things. And then you get onto the breathing and all the stuff you're awesome at, to be able to manage your physiological state. But there are things that have helped.
Very practical, very tactical. I think the whole audience has gone, I could do that one, get a mate, get 2 glasses of red wine, 45 minutes and vent. Did everyone notice there are other skills there as well? The work that you've done, so 23 years, it's a long time with a team. And this is one thing that people often misunderstand. They think that of the morning of a big game, so the Wallabies, we play England and Twickenham our time Sunday morning. The players are front-loading skills, and I've heard you talk about this as well. It's the work you do outside of the big tournaments that prepares you. I think that's something we miss in the corporate and the entrepreneurial world. We go for the big moments and think, I've got to prepare now. Talk to me about that, how you first of all discovered that, because when you were masquerading, I love that story, with your peanut oil, you're here to massage them, not fry them. Sports psych's come a long way, but how did you first navigate that and realise that we've got to prepare in those quieter moments to step up when it really matters?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it started back when I was playing volleyball, and I tell people when I came out of the orphanage and went in to live with my mother, who'd met another man in Palmerston North, who was my stepfather, and he was an alcoholic, and there was just dysfunction everywhere, and it was just a horrific sort of environment to be in. So I went down and I started, I got out of there because as a 16-year-old and said, this ain't going to be helpful to me. And I arrived at Christchurch as a 16-year-old with no place to live and no firm work prospects, but knew I was in a better place. And I started playing volleyball, sport of volleyball, and someone once said to me, "You're good at this, Gilbert." It took me by surprise. Because when he said that, I felt good. So when you hear something you feel good, what did I want to do? I wanted to hear it again. So I had to work harder so I could hear that comment again. That was all I was doing. And so I learned the act of kindness and the power of a kind word, and just how powerful that is to any individual. Like you can do a lot of things in your life, but if you never ever forget the kind acts of kindness. And so if we can give that to the people we work with, live with, love with, then we're penetrating in a lot of areas. And so I wanted to get better, and that's how I met Wayne Smith, and he was an All Black, and he started talking to me about what I was doing in volleyball, and I found that most of the problems people were having in volleyball were between their ears. When I make a mistake, when I'm not selected, when a teammate pisses me off, all these things, they were all mental. And so I called it the final frontier. So I started exploring that. So we gave each of them a book. And so whenever they came to the meeting, the first 20 minutes we sat down and we, what's a high risk situation for you? Okay, where do you want your attention to be should this occur? What do we need to do in training to ensure we refine it? So all of a sudden we were doing mental practice. And even with the corporates I work with, on a Friday afternoon, you go back to your room and you sit down, and as a leader, you ask yourself 3 questions. What did I lead this week? What did I miss leading this week? Saw it, but didn't actually act in the moment. And 3, what did I miss altogether? I didn't even see it, but now that I look back on it, I should have done something. And if you spend 10 minutes on that, then it gives you some reinforcement about things you can move next week. So, so there's all of a sudden you're actually engaging in practical work that can help you manage situations that can potentially derail you.
Good segue, the word reinforcement. In preparation for this, I rang up one of your buddies that you worked with for a number of years and said, I'm talking to Gilbert, and could you give me a little bit of a message? He recorded this for us. Are you feeling nervous?
A little bit.
Bert is more than a mental skills coach. He's a real leader in developing a world-class culture within a team. If everyone in the management group agreed on something and Bert didn't, he was prepared to put his hand up and have a debate. Now that's brave. Not always he was right, to be fair, but as great, he was prepared to stand up for what he believed in. Over the years, Bert did a lot of videoing for me at trainings. He was always hanging on to an iPad, filming my coaching sessions, and he was always a great sounding board after training, just about his observations about what he had heard and what he had seen. A truly unique man who has not cloned himself on anyone else. He's truly his own man.
That's very nice, Chrono.
Chrono did say, do you want some other stories that we can tell after dark? I said, no, we'll keep it PG. So Mike Cron, the scrum doctor, known as the world's best rugby scrum coach. Great man. What do you think when you hear those words?
Oh, look, he's from Chrono, who's such a a great man, it's humbling. When I first started with the All Blacks, I had a huge imposter syndrome. You know, you can imagine my background walking in there and being in front of all these icons. But you know, as I got more comfortable in that environment, I felt that I needed to challenge. You know, when things I didn't agree with, and you know, you can't leave thoughts buried inside your head that you should have shared. So, and as he said, I wasn't always right, but I felt more comfortable sharing it in a safe way so that people could debate it. And well, we just wanted to do what was right for the team, and that was the most important thing.
Another part in the book that I really dug into was when you talk about vulnerability, because it seems a juxtaposition, doesn't it? You're talking about big, strong men and women rugby players going to war against each other, and then you're talking about being vulnerable and dropping your guard and sharing your deepest, darkest inner soul. How did you navigate that balance between being a warrior on the field and being authentic off and on it?
Look, I think there were many pivots in my career with the All Blacks, and one of them was around the understanding of vulnerability. You know, people used to feel if you're being vulnerable and sharing what you really feel, that you were weak, especially men. You know, there was this manly notion that people held. But boy, after 2007, we really had to be vulnerable. You know, the best way I can explain it to you is that you can't improve or train what you won't talk about. I'll repeat that. You can't train what you won't talk about. So I can't help you if you don't tell me what your struggle is. If you tell me what your struggle is, then we can set up drills and things to help you manage your attention and your execution in those moments. It's the same with us sitting in this room. In your work and in your life, if you won't talk about it, we can't help you improve. And so once you do that, what a release it was for the players. And so vulnerable became the new strong. And, you know, when our leaders had their greatest impact, when they shared their innermost feelings with each other as a leadership group and even with the wider group. And so it became a power beyond measure, because the moment somebody does that, we can then help them get better at getting better.
We're going to open up to the audience. We've got a couple of roving mics. I think we'll do this in the old school format. Your hand has gone up even before I said to politely put your hand up, so you can ask first question. Can you tell us your name and then ask the question?
Sure. My name's Lou. I now want to read your book, so thank you very much. I'm a clinical psychologist.
Isn't it good that she didn't say my name's Lou and I don't want to read your book?
So I'm a clinical psychologist and executive coach, and I'm loving hearing a lot about vulnerability and so forth. I'm wondering, and I also specialise in acceptance and commitment therapy or training. I'm not sure if that's something that you've come across. I'm wondering about how you actually work around emotions that might show up even during the match or just before. So whether it is kind of like an acceptance-based willingness or whether it's kind of just doing breathing exercise. I'm really curious what you do around that.
Yeah, like, you know, there's no script in elite sport. That's what I've found. You know, like, it's just self-awareness. You can read as many books as you like, you can listen to as many podcasts as you like and all this, but if you can't read yourself, then it's an issue. And you'll find in the book, as I talk about, and I call it a performance triangle, sort of where you have your mindset, your skill set and your structure. You know, you have the three parts. And when things go really, really well, there's alignment between those three. What I've found is that one of those, though, is a superpower. When I'm working with an athlete and something's not going right, I often say, is it a mindset issue, skill set issue, or a structure issue? And it helps me navigate their way. But I found one of them to be a superpower, more important than all the others. Who thinks it's skill set? Put your hand up. Wow. You're the same. Who thinks it's mindset? Put your hand up. Beautiful, most of the hands. Who thinks it's structure? There's two. I found it's structure. That structure is because everyone comes into the All Blacks and nothing wrong with their mindset. They want to be 100 test All Black. They want to be there for 10 years. They want to be great. And that becomes a real focus for them. And their skill set's awesome. They can do wonderful things. But when things break down, it's because they can't manage the competing demands that enable them to execute either in the moment or the bigger picture. Rehab, prehab, analysis, maintain my relationships, do all these sort of things. It's like that game of Jenga where you pull pieces of wood out of the Jenga and you pick one or two and it wobbles. All of a sudden you do three. And I was speaking to one of the players, and he said, "That's bullshit, Bert." He says, "I'm on the field and the referee makes a decision that I don't agree with, and I want to punch him in the head. Unless I shift my mindset, I'm in trouble." And I said, "Correct." And he says, I said, "On a scale of 0 to 10, where are you in terms of frustration?" He said, "I'm 11 out of 10. And I said, "What about if you're on the field and the referee makes a decision you don't agree with, which is going to happen more often than not? What if you take 2 paces away from where you are, 1, 2, and then basically when you're there, ask the first person, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? Listen to the response, repeat one back, take a breath, then come back and connect with the next moment." He said, "Okay, I'll try it." So he tried it, and I said, "How'd it go?" He said, "It went from an 11 out of 10 to a 6 or 7 out of 10. Hadn't taken it away." What had we given him? Structure. Once we understand that we can shift mindsets by giving people structure, but if you keep going through the mindset window, you'll keep hitting a brick wall. So coming back to your question, so what we tend to do is when you get things that happen that may emerge, like the emotional challenges, what's the structure you have to deal with it? And sometimes you need a structure for when you haven't got a structure. And that's, hey, I'm not sure whether I'm totally right, but boy, I've helped more people than I haven't by driving down that path. And that's why I call it in the book the lethal cocktail. In the land of high performance, structure is king, and every king needs a queen, and its queen is discipline. And with those 2 things, you navigate your way through most things in life. Long way to answer your question, but
I'll just round out one other thing. What's different between working in a clinical setting, which is often one-on-one or maybe one to small groups? In a squad, you have up to 36 or 38 players. So sometimes you'll have a player, it's got to be a mindfulness-based technique or something that is very quick and sharp, right through to you might have senior players that Gilbert talks about that have understood purpose and values and really connected, and you can get deeper. It's like having a toolkit and then you pull out, you've got 5, 6 different hammers. You don't always hit the same nail with the same hammer. And that's what someone very skilled like Gilbert does, is the right conversation with the right person at the right time.
yeah, but I mean, I'll check of that too, because there's a lot of times people come to me and I say, I don't know. Oh, I don't know. But I said, give me some time to think. That honesty's been really good, and then I talk to people, and somebody has the first door. You know, most coaches came to me and come into my room and they quite often say, "Where are we going with this bird?" And I say, "I don't know, but I know I'm heading in the right direction." And they learn to understand and accept that. So just being honest, and boy, I tell you, there's a lot of times I didn't know, but once I sat, reflected, I found the first step, you know, that we could take.
Yeah, good afternoon, Stefan. I mean, you talk a bit about sort of the implication of sort of the learnings from elite sport into business potentially. But I'd like to bring you into another field of parenting and youth. And what sort of where you're coming from? What are sort of the learning as we think through the youth, and in particular as they go through their, the difficult teenager years?
One of the things I wanted for this book, there's something like there's pressure in everyone's role. You know, we're just talking about high performance sport, but we're talking business, coaching, parenting, all the roles. And I did a sort of a word event similar to this in Christchurch when I released my book. 400 people in the group. The youngest was 19 and the oldest was 90. And I kind of loved it because I sort of wanted people, there's something in it for everybody. And that's why I say it's a book you'll never finish, because when you're reading it, different things land with you at different times. And so I summarised right at the end, and we're talking about become unstoppable. If you could paraphrase it into one phrase, it's you against you. It's not you against who you work for. It's not you against the market. It's not you against the political system. It's you against you. And whether you're a child, a parent, or anything, if you understand that and you can visibly see that obstacle, then you can navigate your way through some of those things. And so I'd like to think the skills that are applicable for a A-lead athlete, for a grassroots athlete, and for a child aspiring, a young person aspiring, or a parent going through parenting issues will get great value from some of the tools inside the book.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Charles. I was interested, I guess, in around self-driven culture, particularly within the All Blacks. Obviously, they're renowned for the way they conduct themselves, and I guess basically I was interested in high-performance teams or any team and how kind of you approached having within the team and everyone buying into the same ideas. Obviously, everyone likes to think they have all these great values and we're all fall short in different areas, but how kind of everyone stayed focused around buying into the same systems, conducting themselves in the same way. What kind of ways you perhaps approach that?
For an All Black, the legacy is far more intimidating than any opponent, full stop. So living up to the expectations of those that have gone before you is the biggest driver for an All Black. And for a young male and now females with the Black Ferns growing up in our country, the wanting to be an All Black or a Black Fern is an endeavour that a lot of people want to pursue. And so it bleeds its own expectations. And so I kind of, when people came in, I always use what's my job? When I had 23 years with the All Blacks, 304 test matches, what's my responsibility? And it was always to ETJ was the phrase I used, enhance the jersey. And that's my job. And that's what everybody that comes into the All Blacks' responsibility is. And so with that comes an accountability that you've got to live up to. And don't use it as a burden, use it as something that is hugely strong. We don't have a lot of rules. You know, like if you have a strong purpose, you don't need rules. And if your purpose is to do that, we introduced the no dickheads policy because we had a few people who were being dickheads and they weren't helping the legacy at all. So we just jettisoned them and got rid of them really smartly. But most of it's wrapped up in the accountability that they have and the expectation to live up to what has gone before them. That drives, I'm not a great fan of the word values. I kind of prefer standards. You know, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. So, you know, if you're doing things that aren't in the best interest of the team, expect to be told. And if you don't tell me, then you're letting me down because I don't know that my behaviour is not in the best interest of the team. So, you know, it's not complex. It's reasonably simple. And when our culture's going really well, I hear lots of people picking people up for standards that are not where they needed to be.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Anyone here going to bring the no dickheads policy back into their workplace? Makes people a bit nervous, doesn't it, Gilbert? Yes, next question. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Chiho. I was just wondering what teams or organisations do you admire today?
Look, I've always gravitated to leaders and teams that buy into something that's bigger than themselves. You know, the thing about the All Blacks that I loved was the fact that the team towers above the individual. You know, I kind of enjoy Brendan McCullum, who's coaching cricket for England, because you know how many meetings that guy has in a week? Which is really, really different to the model everyone else has, because he says we force people into paradigms that we think is helping them, but they're not, because what we want to do is free them up so that when they play they can just perform. And so he's going against the norm. So I've always thought leadership is more personal before it's positional. So I love leaders and organisations that lead from who they are rather than where they sit. So I'd never work with a team or a leader where that was compromised, because that becomes much more challenging for me. I always I look at the leader And if that leader, he or she, is strong in that area, then I'll give them everything I got. And when I do that, then I kind of like being on teams that can move towards a good goal.
It's pretty easy to find meaning in the change room. So meaning what people are doing, what they're going out to conquer, they're going out to battle. Have you got any suggestions for, we're all searching for meaning in the meeting room with our own teams? I'm personally, we're trying to close down some certain businesses that are underperforming, things like that at the moment, things that need to be done. How does what you do translate for us into the workplace with our own teams? And I know that's a broad question, so just hone in on a couple of
great question. Okay, so two things I think from that. One is something I sort of said earlier on, is that you won't get an external shift unless you get an internal shift. So I spend most of my time working out what's the internal shift that I want to get in the players. So in the All Blacks, every week we had what we called an MMA, which is a mental meeting. MMA, maximising mental ability. I led it with the players. MMA is an acronym for the mixed martial arts too. And so we put the chairs in the shape of an octagon. Okay, so it's just like, it was a metaphor for that. I used to, that meeting presentation to the guys would go 7 or 8 minutes, and I'd spend 20 to 30 hours preparing on how I'd do that session. Because from the moment they walked into that room, I wanted to capture them and connect with them, and I was exploring and working ways to do it. So I think that's the first thing I always say, how am I going to get the internal shift that gets them to buy into the external one? Sometimes just the brutal reality is what you have to do. What's the second part? And I've always mentioned it, that we need a solid what? Let's say it loudly. Structure, correct. Just think structure. What's the structure I'm going to use to put across to the people to get them to hear the message in the right way? Those two things I think will get you a good way there. Mightn't get you totally there, but they really, really help you get to those places. And I'm always looking at it and saying, how am I going to get them to see the picture I want to do, and explore that. And then I just say, right, what's the structure I'm going to use to do it? And both those are tools that can help.
We've got time for 1 or 2 more questions, but before we take another one, I've just got to go back. Up to 30 hours preparation for a 7 or 8 minute discussion.
Correct. Absolutely.
What would that 30 hours look like?
Well, if you read the book, there's a quote, I think in the front testimonial by Dane Coles, who was one of the All Blacks, that he says, if you walk into Gilbert's room on tour, you'll see all these pieces of paper hanging up in the room, and it looks like a 5-year-old's gone into his room and scribbled all over the walls. And so I'm old-fashioned, I use paper. I use those big AO Post-its, and I start with an idea and I put it up, and the game's finished and I just start it's like that movie Beautiful Minds, really. And so I just start sort of getting ideas, getting thoughts. I had a group from my MMA group would come in and we would talk and we would add different things, and I'd listen to the coaches and what they're wanting to achieve, so that it was never ever against what they did. It was always in line with what they did. And then slowly it would piece together, and I'd start that on probably a Sunday night and it's delivered on a Thursday. So it's throughout that period that I generate that. So it's collection. I'm a strong believer in collecting the dots before you connect the dots. Too many people rush in to your situation and connect the dots straight away. Collect them. Who are the adversaries here? Who are the influences here? How can I move them? Maybe I deal with this person first and this person first, and I move them. So once I collect the dots, then I can get right, this to this to this to this. But I want them from the moment they walk in and I open my mouth, and one of my leaders open their mouth, is I want to have their attention in the palm of my hand. And that's when you move them.
I think final question up the front. We can squeeze in 2 more.
Thanks,
My structure girl.
But how, if you're seeing something come up in a player or a person, how do you decide if that's something that is limited to that person or something that the whole group needs to learn? I was thinking about those MMA things where there could be one critical
skill or lesson that needed to be learnt, but it might be the individual, but it might be the group as well. How do you sort of delineate how you work and what the right sort of toolkit is?
Inside our team, we had what we called IOUs, independent operating units. Okay, I later changed them to pods, POD, pockets of dominance, because a lot of people said, well, how can we be great if everyone else is a plonker? You know, and people say that in organisations, but if you get them working only on their little pocket of that they're in and make that dominant. So in the All Blacks, we had IOUs and pods, and that goes right across the team. We had one representative in my MMA group. I had one representative from each of those different pods. So whenever we're talking about that, then they're speaking on behalf of their pod. So any of those indiscrepancies that would come in that we felt may have been individualistic and not general would normally be picked up in that conversation. So whilst I started my work on a Sunday, I met with my group on a Tuesday. We tersed out what the message might be, then worked it again, and anything that was individual was dealt with individually, but we just said, what's the collective message that the team needs to do it? I kind of like, you know, that people say, how can I be great if everyone else around me is just a load of whatchamacallit? You can. Just don't compromise on being great in the pocket that you're responsible for and you're operating in. And then you move and other people look at it and say, wow, look what's happening there. And it can accelerate the progress in other areas as well.
Can I thank you today on two levels? One, can I thank you from everybody in the mental skills and sports psychology space to be so open in your book, to give your 40 plus years of work. It really is a masterclass in mental performance, culture and leadership, and that intersection of all three that you beautifully write about. And for Florence Guild and the members here today, what a great opportunity to have you speak openly, so authentic, so raw, and to bring all those skills, not just from sports fields, but how we bring that into our life and even to family and having relationships. So can you all please join me with the rambunctious thank you to Gilbert Enoka.
Thank you.